Franz Stiegler puts his finger on the trigger. The crippled American bomber fills his gun sight. This is the kill he needs. One more bomber and he earns the Knight's Cross. He squeezes, and then he stops. He pulls his Messerschmitt alongside the shattered B-17 and looks inside through the holes torn in the fuselage by German cannon fire. He sees men slumped over their guns. He sees blood frozen on the walls. He sees a tail gunner who is not moving and never will again. Franz Stiegler takes his hand off the trigger. He just made a decision that could get him shot by his own side. And the 21-year-old American farm boy in the cockpit next to him has no idea whether the German pilot hovering 3 feet off his wingtip is about to save his life or end it. Charles Lester Brown is born on October 24, 1922 in Weston, West Virginia. He grows up on a farm in the hills of Lewis County. His childhood is quiet, modest, and rooted in the rhythms of agricultural life. He is the kind of young man who does his chores without being asked and treats people with genuine courtesy. His neighbors describe him the same way everyone who ever met Charlie Brown describes him. Decent, reliable, calm, the kind of person you want next to you when things go wrong. When the war starts after Pearl Harbor, Charlie enlists. He trains as a pilot. By April 1943, he has earned his wings and his commission as a second lieutenant. By early November 1943, he is in England, assigned to the 527th Bombardment Squadron of the 379th Bombardment Group, stationed at Royal Air Force Kimballton in Cambridgeshire. He flies Boeing B-17 Flying Fortresses. The group's nickname is Hell's Angels. Charlie's plane is named Ye Old Pub. He is 21 years old and he has never flown a combat mission in his life. The mission scheduled for December 20th, 1943, is not just any mission. It is Charlie Brown's first. The briefing tells the crews everything they need to know and nothing they want to hear. The target is a Focke-Wulf aircraft production facility in the city of Bremen, in northern Germany. Bremen is one of the most heavily defended cities in the Reich. More than 250 anti-aircraft guns ring the target area. German fighter opposition will be intense. The bombers will be flying into the throat of one of the most dangerous defensive networks in Europe, and Charlie Brown will be flying his first combat mission straight into the middle of it. There is one more detail from the briefing that the crews absorb in silence. Ye Old Pub has been assigned to fly Purple Heart Corner. That is the position on the far edge of the bomber formation where the German fighters always attack first. It is called Purple Heart Corner because of what happens to the men who fly it. Before the mission, 3 other bombers turn back with mechanical problems. Charlie Brown is told to move Ye Old Pub up to the front of the formation instead. He nods. He climbs into the cockpit. He starts the engines. He has no way of knowing how completely this morning is about to come apart. Shortly after 11 in the morning on December 20th, the bomber stream crosses into German airspace. 8 miles of B-17s and B-24s heading northeast toward Bremen. Charlie Brown is at 27,300 feet. The outside air temperature is minus 60 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, the metal of the aircraft frame is brittle. Oil freezes in gun mechanisms. Exposed skin freezes in seconds. Every man on board is bundled into layers of heated flight gear and oxygen masks. They are flying in a machine that was never meant to be comfortable, only survivable. The flak starts before they reach the target. German 88mm anti-aircraft guns firing 20-pound shells on timed fuses, detonating at different altitudes to fill the sky with shrapnel. The explosions rock the bomber. Charlie holds the controls and keeps the plane straight. Then the first direct hit. A red flash directly in front of the cockpit. The plexiglass nose shatters and the fragments smash against the windshield. Ice-cold air at minus 60 degrees blasts through the opening at the front of the plane. The men up front are unhurt, but now they are flying in open air. A second shell hits engine number 2 and kills it completely. A third shell damages engine number 4 so severely that Charlie has to throttle it back to prevent it from shaking itself apart. The Old Pub releases its 12 500-pound bombs on the burning city below and turns for home. The formation has not waited. The healthy bombers have accelerated away, and Ye Old Pub is falling behind, struggling on 2.5 engines, bleeding speed with every passing second. A crippled bomber that has fallen out of formation is the German fighter pilot's favorite kind of target. They call it a straggler. They come for stragglers the way wolves come for the animal that cannot keep up with the herd. and the wolves are already in the air. More than a dozen German fighters, a mixture of Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s, descend on Ye Olde pub for 10 minutes of sustained attack. The damage accumulates with every pass. Engine number 3 is hit and reduced to half power. The oxygen system is destroyed. The hydraulic system is gone. The electrical system is gone. Half the rudder is shot away. The port elevator is shot away. The nose cone is gone. The bomber now has 40% of its total rated power available to stay in the air. 9 guns are either frozen or destroyed. Only 2 guns in the dorsal turret and 1 forward-firing nose gun are still working. The crew is in worse shape than the plane. Sergeant Hugh Eckenrode, the tail gunner, is dead, decapitated by a direct cannon shell hit. Sergeant Alex Yelisanko, the right waist gunner, is critically wounded in the leg by shrapnel. Sergeant Samuel Blackford in the ball turret has both feet frozen solid because the electrical heating wires in his flight suit have shorted out. Sergeant Richard Peachute has been hit in the eye by a cannon shell fragment. Charlie Brown has a shrapnel wound in his right shoulder. Most of the morphine syringes on board have frozen solid in the extreme cold, leaving the wounded men without pain relief. The radio is destroyed. The crew discusses bailing out. They look at Yelisanko, critically wounded in the leg, unable to make a safe parachute landing. No one moves toward the exit. They keep flying north. Without oxygen above 20,000 feet, the human brain begins to fail. Charlie Brown knows this. What he does not notice is that it is already happening to him. His thoughts are slowing. His concentration is narrowing. The bomber continues north, away from the target, struggling toward the German coast. Charlie is still in the pilot's seat. He is still holding the controls, but the oxygen tank in his cockpit has been punctured. He is breathing air that is getting thinner with every minute. Ye Olde pub tips to the left and begins to spiral. The remaining engines cannot compensate for the lost rudder and elevator. The bomber rotates inverted and plunges toward the ground in an uncontrolled dive. The crew, many of them already wounded, are thrown around the interior. Charlie's vision narrows to a gray tunnel and then goes black entirely. The bomber screams downward toward the city of Oldenburg at below 3,000 feet. Roof tiles shear off the buildings below as the falling B-17 passes just overhead. Charlie comes back. The lower altitude has more oxygen. His brain reignites. He hauls on the controls with everything he has left. At 3,000 feet, with the rooftops of Oldenburg filling the windshield, he pulls Ye Olde pub out of the dive. The German fighters who were attacking him see the bomber tumbling downward and assume it is finished. They break off. They go looking for other targets. Ye Olde pub is alone in the sky at 3,000 feet, missing half its rudder, flying at 135 miles per hour on damaged engines, with a dead tail gunner, a crew of wounded men, and no working radio. Charlie sets a heading for the German coast and the North Sea beyond it. Between him and England stands the Atlantic Wall. Let us know in the comments where you are watching this from. Are you in the United States, Germany, the United Kingdom, or somewhere else? We would love to know who is keeping these stories alive. Because while Charlie Brown is nursing that dying bomber toward the German coast, a Luftwaffe ace at the Jever airfield just below him is climbing into his Messerschmitt. And what happens next has never happened before, and never happened again. Franz Stiegler is born on August 21, 1915 in Regensburg, Bavaria. He starts flying gliders at the age of 12. He solos in a biplane in 1933. He joins Lufthansa and becomes a commercial airline captain. When the war starts, he joins the Luftwaffe, but not as a fighter pilot at first. He becomes an instructor. One of his students is a young pilot named Gerhard Barkhorn, who will eventually become the second highest scoring ace in history with more than 300 victories. Franz teaches him everything. Then Franz's brother August is killed. His bomber is shot down over the English Channel. Franz transfers immediately to Bf-109 fighters. His motivation is not ideology. It is not hatred of the enemy. It is grief and the need to do something with that grief. He flies combat in North Africa with Jagdgeschwader 27, the same fighter wing that includes Hans-Joachim Marseille, the Star of Africa, considered the most gifted air combat pilot of the war. Franz learns his trade in the unforgiving skies over Libya and Egypt. He watches the Afrika Korps die around him. He survives Sicily. He survives Italy. He comes to the Western European front in late 1943, with 27 confirmed aerial victories. He is 28 years old. He needs one more bomber kill for the Knight's Cross. He has been chasing that number for months. The Knight's Cross is not just a medal to Franz. It is proof that his sacrifices and his brother's death have meant something, that there is purpose in the killing. On the morning of December 20th, 1943, Franz Stiegler is on the ground at Jever Airfield, near the German North Sea coast, supervising repairs to a bullet lodged in his radiator from an earlier mission. His plane is almost ready. He is about to climb back in when the ground crew points at something in the sky, a B-17, flying low, alone, moving slowly northward. Franz looks up. He can already see the damage from the ground. This is the kill he needs. He straps in. He takes off. Franz Stiegler climbs fast and intercepts Ye Old Pub within minutes of takeoff. He pulls in behind the B-17 and positions himself for a classic tail attack. His finger is on the trigger. At this range, with the bomber this damaged, it will take 5 seconds and maybe one short burst to finish this. The Knight's Cross is right there. He begins his attack run, and then something makes him hesitate. The bomber is not returning fire. He expects the tail gunner to be blazing at him. The tail position is silent. He moves closer to investigate. Through the ragged holes torn in the bomber's fuselage by cannon shells and shrapnel, Franz Stiegler can see directly into the aircraft. He can see men lying wounded at their stations. He can see blood frozen on the interior walls. He pulls up beside the tail and looks at the tail gunner's position. The gunner is slumped over his weapon. He is not moving, and he is never going to move again. Franz pushes his Messerschmitt alongside the length of the bomber and looks through every wound in the fuselage as he passes. He sees the condition of the crew. He sees what the last hour of combat has done to these men. He pulls up beside Charlie Brown's cockpit and looks directly at the American pilot. Charlie Brown, exhausted and wounded and barely holding the plane together, looks to his left and freezes. A Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6 is hovering 3 feet off his wingtip. In that moment, a voice comes back to Franz Stiegler, the voice of his commanding officer from North Africa, Oberstleutnant Gustav Rödel. Rödel told his pilot something that no fighter pilot handbook ever said. "If I ever see or hear of you shooting at a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself." Franz Stiegler later describes his thought in that moment with complete simplicity. "To me, it was just like they were in a parachute. I saw them, and I could not shoot them down." He takes his hand off the trigger. Charlie Brown does not know what to think. The German fighter is not firing. It is not breaking away. It is flying in close formation off his left wing as if the two planes belong together. Charlie stares at the German pilot. Franz stares back. Then Franz begins gesturing. He points down toward Germany below them, indicating that Charlie should land at a German airfield. He shakes his head when Charlie does not respond. He points north toward neutral Sweden, just a few hundred kilometers away. Medical care, safety, internment for the rest of the war. Charlie Brown shakes his head. He does not understand. He does not trust the German pilot. He is not going to land in Germany or divert to Sweden. He keeps flying north. Franz Stiegler understands. He knows these men are going to fly straight into the Atlantic Wall. He knows what the anti-aircraft batteries on the German coast will do to Ye Olde Pub. A bomber this damaged, flying this slowly, at this altitude, over the most heavily defended coastline in Europe. The experienced German spotters on the Atlantic Wall will tear it apart before it reaches the water. Franz makes a second decision. He moves his Messerschmitt into close formation on the bomber's portside wing. He tucks in tight. He is going to fly them out. The logic is calculated, and it is a form of courage that has nothing to do with killing. The anti-aircraft spotters on the Atlantic Wall are among the most experienced gunners in the German military. They know their own aircraft. They will see the Messerschmitt escorting the bomber. They will assume that the bomber is a captured aircraft being escorted to a German airfield. They will hold their fire. And they do. Ye Olde Pub and its German escort fly over the Atlantic Wall and out across the North Sea coast without a single gun firing. Charlie Brown does not know why no one is shooting. He cannot see what Franz is doing for him. As Ye Old Pub crosses the coastline and reaches open water over the North Sea, Charlie Brown orders his dorsal turret gunner to aim his guns directly at the German pilot without firing. It is the only warning he can give. The message is clear. We see you. Back off. Franz Stiegler sees the guns swing toward him. He understands. The bomber is over open water now. German airspace is behind them. There is nothing more he can do. He pulls alongside Charlie Brown's cockpit one last time. He looks at the American pilot. He raises his hand in a formal military salute. Then he banks his Messerschmitt hard to the right and turns back toward Germany. Charlie Brown watches him go. He does not know the German pilot's name. He does not know his unit. He has no explanation for what just happened. He turns Ye Olde Pub toward England and keeps flying. Before we follow what happens next, let us look at what Ye Old Pub was carrying when it crossed the North Sea that afternoon. The bomber had taken hits from more than a dozen attacking German fighters over a period of more than 10 minutes. The number 2 engine was dead. The number 3 engine was at half power. The number 4 engine was badly damaged and throttled back. The nose cone was gone. Half the rudder was gone. The entire port elevator was gone. The oxygen system was destroyed. The hydraulic system was destroyed. The electrical system was destroyed. The radio was destroyed. 9 of the 11 defensive guns were frozen or destroyed. Of the 10 men aboard, 1 was dead, 4 were wounded, and 2 more had injuries from the extreme cold. The bomber was flying at 135 miles per hour, which is barely above stall speed for a B-17. It had crossed Germany, survived a spiral dive to 3,000 feet over Oldenburg, flown through the Atlantic Wall, and covered 250 miles across the North Sea, all on what amounted to roughly 40% of its normal engine power. The aircraft that landed that afternoon in England should not have been flying. The men inside it should not have been alive. And the German fighter pilot who had them in his gun sight, with full ammunition at point-blank range, needed only 1 more kill to earn the highest military honor his country could give him. He chose to give up the medal instead. Ye Old Pub does not make it back to RAF Kimballton. Charlie Brown has almost nothing left to fly with. He finds the nearest airfield he can reach and puts the bomber down at RAF Seething, home of the 448th Bomb Group. The landing is hard but controlled. The crew is taken to the base hospital. Hugh Eckenrode's body is recovered from the tail position. The wounded are treated. Charlie Brown is patched up and given a few hours of sleep. The next morning, Charlie sits down with his commanding officer and describes the mission. He describes the damage, the spiral over Oldenburg, the German coast, and then the German Messerschmitt that flew alongside them all the way to the water. His commanding officer listens carefully. Then the report moves up the chain of command. Higher command gets word of the story. Their reaction is not what Charlie expects. The story is classified. No one is to speak of it. A German pilot sparing an American bomber crew is not a narrative the war machine wants circulating among the troops. It raises questions. It complicates the enemy. It is swept under the rug. Charlie Brown goes back to flying combat missions. He completes his tour. The story stays locked inside him. Franz Stiegler lands at Yavor Airfield and says nothing. He tells no one what he did over the North Sea that morning. He knows exactly what telling someone would mean. At minimum, a court-martial. More likely, execution for aiding the enemy in wartime. The story stays locked inside him too. He goes back to flying combat missions. He survives the rest of the war. He flies Messerschmitt Me 262 jet fighters with General Adolf Galland's elite unit Jagdverband 44 in the final weeks of the war. When Germany surrenders in May 1945, Franz Stiegler is still alive. He has flown 487 combat missions. He has been wounded 4 times. He has been shot down 17 times, 4 times by enemy fighters, 4 times by ground fire, and 9 times by gunners on American bombers. He has bailed out 6 times and ridden damaged aircraft down to crash landings 11 times. He has 28 confirmed aerial victories. In 1953, Franz Stiegler emigrates to Canada. He settles in Vancouver, British Columbia, and becomes a successful businessman. December 20th, 1943, stays in his memory the way certain moments stay, not as a source of pride, not as a regret, simply as something that happened. Something he chose to do when no one was watching and when no one would have known if he had made the easier choice. CTA 2, 12 to 14-minute mark. If you are enjoying this story and want more untold accounts from World War II, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We are bringing you stories that most history books never covered. Because for 46 years, these two men carried the same secret on opposite sides of the ocean. And then one of them decided it was time to find the other one. Charlie Brown comes home after the war. He finishes his combat tour with 29 missions completed out of 31 attempted, 24 of them over Germany. He returns to West Virginia. He goes to college. In 1949, he rejoins the newly established United States Air Force and serves until 1965. After retirement from the military, he becomes a United States State Department Foreign Service officer, making multiple trips to Laos and Vietnam during the Vietnam War. He retires from government service in 1972 and moves to Miami, Florida, where he founds a combustion research company. For 4 decades, Charlie Brown carries December 20th, 1943 inside him, the way people carry experiences they cannot fully explain to anyone who was not there. The German pilot who saved him is not a story he tells at dinner parties. It is not something anyone would fully understand. He does not know the pilot's name. He does not know his unit. He has no way to find him. The world has moved on. The war is over. Most people would let it stay that way. In 1986, Charlie Brown is invited to speak at a combat pilot reunion event called The Gathering of Eagles at the Air Command and Staff College at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. He stands in front of a room full of combat veterans and tells war stories. Someone asks him if he has any missions that particularly stand out. He thinks for a moment. Then he tells the story of December 20th for the first time in public. The room is completely silent. After the event, someone walks up to him and asks why he never tried to find the German pilot. Charlie Brown goes home and decides that he should. He spends 4 years searching. He writes to United States Army Air Force's records offices. He writes to United States Air Force archives. He writes to West German Air Force archives. He finds nothing. The German pilot who could have shot him down and did not, who escorted a dying bomber to the coast and then saluted and flew away, has left no trace in any official record. This makes complete sense. Franz Stiegler was never going to file a report describing what he did. In 1990, Charlie Brown writes a letter to a Combat Pilot Association newsletter. He describes the incident. He asks one question. Who was the pilot in the 109? He sends the letter and waits. A few months after the newsletter is published, a letter arrives at Charlie Brown's home in Miami. It is from Vancouver, Canada. The return address is Franz Stiegler. Charlie opens the letter. Inside, Franz has written a short description of what he remembers from December 20th, 1943. He describes his plane. He describes the escort. He describes the salute. Everything matches. Everything is exactly as Charlie remembered it. The last line of the letter is 4 words. I was the one. Charlie Brown picks up the telephone and calls the number on the letter. Franz Stiegler answers. They talk for a long time. Franz describes positioning alongside the cockpit and looking at Charlie. Charlie describes looking to his left and seeing the Messerschmitt 3 feet off his wingtip. They each confirm what the other has been carrying alone for nearly 5 decades. The conversation ends and both men sit with what has just happened. 2 enemies who were never supposed to speak again have found each other 46 years after the most important moment either of them experienced in the war. Their first face-to-face meeting takes place shortly after. When they finally see each other in person, both men are emotional in the way that men of their generation are emotional. Not openly, not theatrically, but genuinely. Charlie Brown grips Franz Stiegler's hand and holds it. Franz says later that he cried. He cried for the men who did not come home from the missions he flew. He cried for his brother August. He cried for the crewman in the tale of Ye Old Pub, who died while everyone else survived. He cried for the 46 years both of them spent carrying the secret alone. Chapter: Brothers Until the End. Between 1990 and 2008, Charlie Brown and Franz Stiegler are close friends. They attend events together. They give joint interviews. They sit side by side on panels and finish each other's sentences. They are in their 70s and then their 80s, two old men from opposite sides of the most destructive war in human history, who found each other at the end of their lives and recognized something in each other that most people around them cannot fully name. Franz receives the Star of Peace from the Combatants Federation of Europe in 1993, presented specifically for his act of mercy on December 20th, 1943. He is believed to be the only Luftwaffe pilot ever to receive recognition from an Allied organization for an act of compassion toward a former enemy in wartime. Back in Germany, the reaction is not always as generous. Franz receives phone calls from people in Germany accusing him of being a traitor to his country. Some of his Canadian neighbors shun him for being a former Nazi, despite the fact that Franz Stigler's wartime record shows no connection to Nazi ideology, only to the Luftwaffe's military code of honor that predated the regime. When asked how he responds to these accusations from both sides, Franz says the same thing every time. They would never understand. In 2008, the United States Air Force finally acts on a request that Charlie Brown had been making for years. The crew of Ye Olde Pub is awarded the Silver Star for their actions on December 20th, 1943. Charlie Brown himself is awarded the Air Force Cross, the second highest military decoration the United States can give, for bringing his shattered bomber home from Bremen. It takes 65 years, but the recognition finally comes. Franz Stigler dies on March 22, 2008, in Surrey, British Columbia. He is 92 years old. Charlie Brown dies on November 24, 2008, in Florida. He is 86 years old. They die within 8 months of each other, the same year the Air Force finally gives Charlie the medal he earned in 1943. Lloyd Jennings, the left waist gunner on Ye Olde Pub, is the last surviving crew member of the incident. He dies in October 2016. Chapter What Franz Chose. The story of Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler appears in history books and documentary films, and a best-selling book by Adam Makos called A Higher Call, published in 2012. It is the subject of a song called No Bullets Fly by the Swedish heavy metal band Sabaton. It inspires a subplot in a television drama. It is taught in military academies as a case study in the laws of armed conflict, and the question of what a soldier owes to an enemy who is no longer a threat. But no book or song or classroom exercise quite captures what Franz Stigler did in the specific context in which he did it. He was not a man at the end of the war who had already given up. He was not a man who believed Germany was losing and was looking for a way to be remembered as someone who showed mercy. It is December 1943. Germany has not yet lost the war. Franz Stigler is an active combat pilot with 27 kills who needs one more to earn his country's highest honor. His plane has ammunition. The bomber is defenseless. No one is watching. No one will ever know. And he still does not shoot. Not because the mathematics of the war have changed. Not because some authority told him not to. Because he looks through the holes in the fuselage of a dying American bomber and sees wounded men. And something in him will not pull the trigger on wounded men. His commanding officer, Gustav Rudel, told him years earlier that a man in a parachute is the same as a man who is no longer fighting. And Franz Stigler decides that a crew too wounded to defend themselves is the same as a man in a parachute. The decision takes 5 seconds. The friendship it eventually creates takes 46 years to begin, and lasts until the day they both die. Charlie Brown flew 29 combat missions. He was wounded twice. He brought Ye Olde Pub home from Bremen on 40% engine power with a dead crewman in the tail and 8 wounded men in the fuselage. He would have died over the Atlantic Wall if Franz Stigler had not tucked his Messerschmitt alongside that bomber and given the anti-aircraft batteries a reason to hold their fire. He spent 46 years looking for the man who saved him. When he found him, he did not ask why. He already knew. He just wanted to say thank you. And Franz, who spent 46 years saying nothing to anyone, finally got to hear it.